So this time I won't forget to pick up the mic first. Hello. I'm back in the game. I'm doing a few recordings today, so don't expect much of a wardrobe change. I had seen a friend of mine post on social about Creed's greatest hits. Now, this person is not particularly a Creed fan. This is not their music of choice. I think it was kind of an inside joke that went a little too far. I know that this person also annually sends out a post to hate on the Eagles. And listen, I'm no huge fan of the Eagles. It's not my genre of first priority either, but I don't hate the Eagles. Not with a violent passion. Not like Lebowski. But Creed. There was really something that happened in the late 90s and early 2000s where rock music went down a particular path, I felt, that generated just some of the most derivative sounding songs ever. And Creed, for me, was at the top of that pile. I figure that a lot of people really like Creed, or at least enjoy Creed, or they don't mind a Creed song. I mean, Creed did write songs that sold out stadiums, right? People really liked it. And I think, didn't they have a Christian influence? Or am I thinking of another band? I keep thinking there was another band exactly like Creed that I also never got into. I know there's Nickelback, but I felt like Nickelback came after, and I'm wondering if there wasn't another band. Anyways, I always thought Creed was the one that had that kind of Christian influence in them. Or their singer was a born-again Christian or something. But it always sounded disingenuine to my ears. Like the music just sounded disingenuine. The overdriven guitars for no apparent reason. Like, it reminded me, and this is going to age me, it reminded me of Mr. Big from like 1990. So Mr. Big was, I think, a one-hit wonder that I remember buying a friend of mine when I was like that age, a cassette tape of Mr. Big for their birthday. And I remember looking at the cover, and even in 1990, 1991, probably 92 actually, even back then, I was getting more into, Metallica and some of the more actually heavy music. And I looked at the cover of Mr. Big, and being a very young person, I saw these dudes with this long hair, and they looked like, at least similar to what like a rock or heavy metal band would look like back then. And then my friend played me a Mr. Big song, and I remember being so utterly disappointed in what I was hearing, because it was just not what I thought would come out of the speakers. I was expecting some rock, and instead I've got, adult contemporary soft stuff. If you don't remember Mr. Big, go Google Mr. Big, the band, and you'll probably like them. I mean, they were a one-hit wonder. I mean, they didn't do a one-hit flop. I didn't. And I suppose since then, anytime somebody tries to come out with really kind of like this aggressive edge to the music, I just don't buy it as much. There's a barrier there. Call it the Mr. Big barrier, where I'm just like, make me believe it. It happened a bunch with me through the 90s. I mean, I fell in love with Nirvana's Nevermind, like just everybody else at that time. Nirvana's Nevermind came very much out of a punk background. There was Nirvana as a band had started really in the subculture in the basements of Seattle. There was edge to them. There was edge to Kurt. There was edge to Dave's drumming. Dave Grohl liked Motorhead. Dave Grohl, you could see that these guys, they played and they smashed their guitars, and there was edge to them. You could believe the intensity of the music. But as you go through the 90s, what's really funny is that after what happened with Nirvana, Dave took that time off and then came back and formed the Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters, there was a barrier for me to that band. I like some Foo Fighter songs, but I wouldn't listen to 2 albums of Foo Fighters back to back. I could listen to 2 Nirvana albums back to back. Dave is known to have been one of the good guys of rock, one of the real ambassadors of music, promoting bands that are smaller than his, promoting good music, always celebrating his influences, and generally just being a good dude. And a really good writer, to be quite honest. You don't come from Nirvana, start up a new project, and have it hit like Foo Fighters hit. That is a massive accomplishment. Just for me, it always felt not disingenuine. It just, I don't know, there's something about that kind of, for instance, I love Radiohead. This is going to go all over the place. I love Radiohead. Radiohead started out as a Brit rock band. They moved very much into the ambient direction by their 4th album, Kid A. And I've loved them ever since. They have done some stuff that has really been experimental and exciting. That's okay. I also like quiet music. I like certain bands that can play at a very soft dynamic. But I also love avant-garde black metal, and I love some death metal, and I love very heavy, very fast, aggressive music. I love me some grindcore, and grindcore sounds pornographic, but it's really just death metal mixed with punk in 1-minute songs that tear your ears off. But there's something about the just below heavy metal, but just above alternative rock, where people try to be a little bit edgier, but not quite edgy enough. That's where I just don't get sold. And that's where friggin' Creed sat. They were a little bit heavier than an alternative rock band, but just not quite as heavy as, with no edge. It was just production. It drove me insane. And so I never got into them. And through the 90s, this happened a bunch. I bought the Spin Doctors cassette tape because everybody bought it back in whenever it came out. I think I listened to it full through like 2 times in my life. And I can't remember except for the big hit. Lenny Kravitz. Never bought the cassette tape, but Lenny Kravitz, when he came out, it was rock music. You have to remember there was very clean lines back in the early 90s between what was pop, what was rap, and what was rock. Those got blurred 10 years later. But at that time, it was very clear that Lenny Kravitz was a rock musician. Or at least that was the genre he was playing. It turns out he was more of a pop artist than anything else. But again, there was something about it that just, it was catchy, but it just had no edge to it. There's just no edge to it. Now, I say edge, and I've just told you some of the music that I listen to, and it's like, well, George, if it's not, basically decapitating you sonically, then you're going to say it has no edge. It's not true. I felt like Radiohead had edge to it. There was a certain experimentalism to them, a somberness to them that, really hit emotionally. Creed never hit emotionally. I could guarantee, like, it's happened to me 1,000 times. You listen to an album of a band that's maybe just phoning it in, and you get to the end of it, and you go, I don't remember any of that. I remember literally nothing of what I just heard. That's how unengaged I was. That would be Creed. Like, I can tell you a couple of Creed riffs. Like, if you were to show me a riff from a really popular Creed song, I'd remember it just because it's been played 10,000 times. But I can't tell you the name of a single Creed song. And I can't tell you, maybe Arms Wide Open, isn't that one of them? Is that the big one? So I guess I can say one Creed song. But boring. It's just boring. There's nothing to it. My musical journey really, it started, interestingly enough, it started with the Ghostbusters soundtrack from the original movie. Little Rick James on there. Really nothing hard rock or heavy metal. I remember I think my mom played me an Enya song once, Sail Away. I remember it was. I think it was just on the radio. I don't think she played it for me, but I heard it on the radio. And I remember really liking that song for some whatever reason. I also really remember having an emotional reaction to Go West by the Pet Shop Boys. Like, really random songs. I guess this kind of epicness, this kind of size of sound that really drove me. But by the late 80s, and at that point I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, I was already going, like, I already had some people that were showing me some of the early Metallica, some early Megadeth, and going, wow, this has bite to it. This really has edge. And I kind of stayed in that vein. Then I got into Nirvana because, again, Nirvana exploded everywhere. And I mean, I'm sure all of you have seen that, like Metallica's Black Album, Nirvana's Nevermind, Alice in Chains' Dirt, and I think Pearl Jam's 10 all came out like within 44 days of each other. I think Bad Motorfinger from Soundgarden also did that. But again, the Big Four grunge, I was pretty much into them. I definitely favorited Nirvana, probably followed by Alice in Chains, then Soundgarden, then Pearl Jam. In that order. They had edge. Obviously, maybe the edge was mental dysfunction, because, 3 of those guys are dead now, in terms of the lead men for those bands, but the music they wrote felt like something. Creed doesn't feel like anything. It feels like white bread with nothing on it. So I got into that stuff, and I remember I kind of stayed at that level, and my mother kept hoping I would grow out of it. And there would be this music show in the 90s on Much Music, and for the American viewers, that's Canadian MTV, which was better. Much Music was so much better than MTV, where they had a late night Saturday show called Loud, where they actually would exclusively play hard rock and heavy metal for half an hour, because otherwise you were getting pop music all day, or whatever was popular. And it was there that I started to discover some of the more extreme stuff. At first, totally turned me off. I can give you some case choices of what turned me off early on. The first time I heard Morbid Angel, no. The first time I heard Carcass, no. The first time I heard Napalm Death, no. I heard all those bands in the mid-90s or early 90s. I heard them all. I didn't get it. It's the classic arguments. It was too loud. It was too fast to discern anything. And the vocals were just too far gone. Like too much growling, too much screaming. Couldn't figure out what there was. I couldn't figure out the melody. The trick with that music, the music that I love, which is metal, the trick has always been, one, accept that it's going to bludgeon you. Accept that you're going to get beat up. And two, really listen. You have to really listen because there is a lot going on. There's a lot of earworms in what they're doing. There's a lot to discover. And some of those aggressive vocals, I don't think most of those bands would work without them now. I came around on all those bands that I just mentioned later on. It was only later on that I got it. It was a gateway band between the two worlds that really took me from one side to the other, and that was Fear Factory. Fear Factory was an interesting beast. Fear Factory was kind of the first very successful integration of industrial music with like death metal riffing and drumming. So death metal riffing being like that kind of machine gun sounding guitar and the machine gun sounding drums with the double bass going, with Raymond Herrera as the drummer. And then they would incorporate industrial. So industrial, I also love Nine Inch Nails. So they would incorporate industrial. So samplings, some keyboard effects. They had Rise Fulber from Frontline Assembly doing work on a lot of their early albums. And that was kind of the first time you ever saw a mishmash of genres like that. And then you had the singer, Burton C. Bell. Now, Burton growled, Burton screamed, but Burton could also sing. And what everybody talked about in those days was how Burton was like the first clean, aggressive singer. So he would have like an aggressive verse, and then he would sing a chorus, and then an aggressive verse, and then he would sing a chorus. At first, when I first heard Replica by Fear Factory back in 95 or 96. Yeah, album came out in 95, so they must have been doing the video in 96. When I first heard it, I was like, nope, the screaming too much. The earworm came in, though, and I kept wanting to see that song again on the Much Music show. And I would always be really excited if it came up. And then from there, it just fell off a cliff. And I started getting into the really extreme stuff. So it took probably another, I want to say 10 years to kind of get deeper into the more avant-garde or experimental or really progressive extreme music. And that's kind of where I sit now. Now, I don't just listen to that. There's some electronic stuff that I like. And like I said, I'll never pass up a Radiohead release. And I'll listen to various alternative music, but just never Creed. Never something that feels that corporate, that commercial, while also trying to look like it's being edgy. Corporate and commercial has a place so long as it's blatantly corporate and commercial. Just, I don't know. I always felt like Creed was a slap in the face. I suppose a lot of people harp on Nickelback for the same reason. I never got that mad at Nickelback because Nickelback came after, and Nickelback made sense because Creed had been successful. I hope I'm getting that right, that Nickelback came after Creed. I feel like it did. I didn't research this. But you could see why a record label would see the success of Creed and go, let's find the same thing, get rid of the born-again Christian stuff, lose the insane singer, and, move forward with somebody that's a little bit more stable. So, yeah, if you want a deep dive into the 10 albums that I would say influenced me the most, I have written on my website, diatribesandsquirrels.com, diatribesandsquirrels.com, I've written a blog and described the 10 albums that really influenced my musical taste. They're not all heavy metal and death metal. OK Computer is on there. Nevermind is on there. So check it out. Read what I wrote. If it interests you, take a listen to the albums. They're all on Spotify. If you want suggestions, if there's anything you hear that you would like to find something similar, leave comments. I'd be happy to answer. And don't be afraid to dig down the rabbit hole of music. Because if you just listen to things like Creed and think that that's what music has to offer, you are missing. You're not even looking at the tip of the iceberg and missing the 90% underneath. You're missing the whole iceberg, and you're sitting on an ice cube in an ocean that's melting it very fast. So, yeah. Creed. Ugh.